Hello, we are lucky here today at the Comic Festival in Birmingham, Edgbaston, to be with up-and-coming manga artist Asia Alfasi, and I would like to introduce the audience now to Asia. And the first question is going to be the easy question: how did you get into comics?
Well, there's the long answer, the short answer. The long answer, actually, let's just very quickly, the short answer, it happened in Birmingham. That jump from just a person who sketches, a person who loves drawing, to actually going into the field of comics. This was Birmingham, born and bred in that way. I've always been interested in manga. I didn't know it was called manga. I did not know it was Japanese. That was when I was in Libya. Because in the Arab countries at that time, in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s, they were importing all of Studio Ghibli's old works, which is all of the classical novels of the world, all the classics, Tom Sawyer, Little Women, Anne of Green Gables, all of them. We watched them all, and it gave us a huge hunger for something like learning more. Coming to Birmingham, the first time there was an advert that was, well, actually not an advert, it was a competition. I was asking people to send 2 to 4 pages of artwork without any words, and the prize was not money, it was not cash or a trip somewhere or something.
Or a television.
No, or a radio.
Something useful.
No, it was 10 weeks, a 10-week course with professionals in the field. No, my brother told me about this opportunity with 2 days to go. I was 19.
19.
Yeah, a long time ago. And my brother told me about this the day before, I think, the deadline. And it was something that I was so adamant, because where else would you get something like this? That if you win a place of the 10 places that were available, you get taught by the best in the field, professionals in the field. So, as became afterwards the norm for me in competitions, to do something the day before, hand it in by hand because there's no time to send it through the mail. And I managed to get a place. I was the only girl at the time, and the youngest actually, so at 19 years old, so it was a great honour. We were taught by John McRae and Hunt Emerson, so both Birmingham-based, and it was fantastic. It was the first time my eyes were opened to the true extent of comics in the comics world, and where I attended my first convention.
And you've been building a profile both locally, nationally and globally, I think, over a number of years. What have been some of the highlights for you over your relatively short career in the comic world?
Made shorter still, if I may say, over the past 4 years, having disappeared off because I went to Libya. I did sign a deal. Okay, biggest highlights, to answer that question first, is winning the International Manga Anime Festival, and that was something that I didn't think I had a chance in, and that was back in 2007, something like that, which put me on the map suddenly. It was a very surreal thing, completely unexpected, and that's probably because I think many people are recycling the same manga characters over and over and over, and I decided that perhaps maybe what they're looking for is an original thing. So you learn a language, and manga is a language, but instead of just using it to speak about Japan and Japanese characters that already exist, breaking out of the fold and using that language to communicate about your culture, something that has not been talked about before. And something like that I've discovered was almost the nugget that would set you apart in the comics world, no matter how much less talented you may feel that you are, or less experienced than others in the field. But to have something that sets you apart, for your work to be original, and for you to have something new to say that has not been said before, that was a highlight.
And you mentioned yourself, I remember you making a big impression on a number of schools in Birmingham a few years ago, and as you see, you seem to have dropped off the face of the British map anyway. So where and what have you been doing then over the last few years in Libya, and are we going to see any of that reflected in any work that's upcoming or current?
Most definitely. I did sign, just before the great hiatus as it seems, I had signed a deal with Bloomsbury, USA, to publish my graphic novel. It's a 2-part graphic novel. The first part of the graphic novel is set in Libya during the 70s and the 80s, and the second part happens in Glasgow, which is where I grew up. So it's similar to my graphic novel, and the purpose of that is to show two entirely different cultures from an insider's perspective, and perhaps to give each of those cultures the chance to look at themselves through the eyes of a person who lived there first as a national and then almost as a newcomer, and for many things to be taken from that, because each place has its positives and its negatives, and it's great for everybody to realise that and maybe learn something from the counter culture. But I wasn't allowed to write or draw a lot of what I had wanted to before the Libyan revolution. I have two uncles that were imprisoned during the Gaddafi era, and they were killed there, and my parents actually repeatedly told me and ripped up a couple of my chapters because they said that it was simply too dangerous to publish something like that. The result was going to be something that it was extremely shallow and bland, and it broke my heart because I had looked at something like Marjane Satrapi's Persepolis, and I was hoping to give a similar heartfelt, true rendition of Libya. And I thought it would be a betrayal if all I did was reproduce some kind of really meaningless, shallow drivel. I did not want to do that, so I stopped for a while, and then I got the chance to go to Libya, and I thought, okay, I'll go to Libya and I'll finish this graphic novel there. This was in 2011, January 2011. February 2011, revolution began in Libya. Amazing. I was only supposed to stay in Libya a month, so I decided I was going to see this through.
Wow.
And so I did. I stayed that year and beyond in Libya. It was difficult to do any work at the time because everything was happening so fast. It was a dangerous situation, but it was exciting at the same time. There was so much like an awakening that was unrivaled in Libya at the time. And I got the chance to listen to so many stories, so many accounts from people who talk about the past because it's now relevant again. Before, nobody could even talk about it because you never know who was a secret police. So it was, and I think it's very difficult for somebody who's never lived in such a situation to imagine what that could be like. And even for me at the time, it was a big learning experience. So I took that time to listen, to sit down and listen to people, because a lot of what they were saying was very relevant about what had happened before in the 60s, the 70s and the 80s, and then that would inform the book. By the time I came back, I decided that that's it. I was going to redraw the whole thing, rewrite the whole thing to include everything that I was not allowed to before. Now, it does have the context. It does make sense. It does have all of the cultural, political, and societal relevance points that before I wasn't able to include. And that's why now it's taking time, and the chapters are giving birth to more chapters. So that's my main project at the moment. Not even talking about the possible revolution book in the future as well, because yeah, it would be sinful not to.
Wow, a lot on your plate. So when, dare I say, from a business point of view, would we expect to see work reflected from your time in Libya published?
I have just signed with an American agent, and she used to be actually my previous editor at Bloomsbury. Yeah, so she's now my agent. No, yeah, she started her own agency. She did fantastically, became the executive editor before she then started her own agency. And she's in talks at the moment. Also, I'm in talks with a publisher, Dargaud, in France, who want the French rights to the book. So, because it keeps growing, the book at the moment, it's, I think, unwise for me to say that this year, but inshallah, definitely by next year it will be out.
But this is the success story I'm hearing from a number of female creators today at this particular comic convention, that there is a wide market, an untapped market, and it's a market that can allow all genres. I mean, someone at the panel earlier said, Jessica Martin, I think it was, this is the medium, it's not a genre, and within that medium, like television, like film, like music, you can do anything you want.
It is a language. It is basically a language, and you can use a language, and you should use a language to communicate whatever needs to be communicated. It was something that I used to think before, and when you reflect upon it, if you take English, for example, and then you say if somebody learned English, put in the effort to learn English, and then when they spoke, they only spoke about shepherd's pie and football, like it would be meaningless. There would be no two-way street. It's actually quite shallow in the long run, because a language is meant to inform both. is you're supposed to export and import. And that is something, when it comes to the Arab world, I'm not going to blame sort of like, say, the West or American creators. No, it's actually not their, I think, job to communicate my culture or my point of view. And I think this was what Marjani Satrapi did. I found myself being a bit upset when I was reading her book years ago. And because whenever she drew hijabi characters, women in hijab, they were always baddies and they were always drawn as evil. This was her
Have you seen
experience.
American Sniper then?
No. Because to me, something like American Sniper is like if ISIS were to produce a film glorifying one of their killers. Because killing is killing. But that's a whole new topic.
Yes.
It's actually a huge topic, and I think it brings up some philosophical arguments that are crazy if you are willing to put aside everything that you know and all of your prejudices and look at it merely, you know, on a level field, on a level playing field, without thinking ideas of who's a good guy and who's a bad guy. It is scarily similar. It's eerily crazy, you know. So to me, it's like if the Nazis were to make a film glorifying what they were doing. I'm not necessarily the Holocaust per se, but whatever other horrors that they were doing. So, but anyway, we digress.
No, we did, but it was a wonderful digression anyway. What we're saying, I suppose, is comics, even today, has the potential to tell anyone's story, everyone's story, and it allows for that ability to have many different opinions.
The greatest, I think one of the greatest gifts that comics does and gives us is the ability to humanize people. You're not just seeing them as a stereotypical kind of pawn that is there to fill in a certain position in the story and that's it, or this is the black guy, he just rubbed something. You can take out this cop-out easy method, but you will end up with really shallow drivel that is not worth the paper it's printed on. On the other hand, you can use it, or you can choose to really humanize the people that you are talking about. The minute that you step away from stupid kind of generalizations and predictable stereotyping, you suddenly enter the realm of intriguing stories that will add and benefit and teach, and enlighten people, any readers. In the same way that we learned and we watched all of the classics in anime form, it was an experience like no other. To watch and read about things that were happening, say, in Finland or in Sweden or in America, things that shaped generations, for you to watch that. This is the level I think that comics should aspire to be, rather than to use it to further, spread hate and push people apart. Which
Comics for a peaceful world, why not?
For humanizing the world instead of just demonizing, So at least that's my dream anyway.
It's everyone's dream, and I think we'll leave it on that dream. Asia, thank you for your time
Thank
today.
you very much. Thank you, it's a pleasure.